Our community is bleeding. We are in pain, and for the last year, we've been screaming out for help. A bullseye on the back of Asian Americans across this country, on our grandparents, on our kids. This hearing was to address the hurt and pain of our community and to find solutions.
U.S. lawmakers voiced their concerns this past week at an anti-Asian racism hearing, the first of its kind in over 30 years. It comes days after a mass shooting in Atlanta. A white gunman killed 8 people, 6 were Asian women. In Canada, police departments across the country are reporting more hate crimes against Asian Canadians during the pandemic.
Oh gosh, I gotta go out today and I hope nobody looks at me the wrong way, and there are days like that.
And in a report released by Statistics Canada in July 2020, the proportion of visible minorities who've experienced an increase in harassment or attacks based on their race, ethnicity, or skin color has tripled to 18% compared to the rest of the population since the start of the pandemic. For more on anti-Asian racism in this country, we've assembled a panel of MPs. From the Liberals, Ontario MP Han Dong is here. Ontario Conservative MP Michael Chong joins us. And from the NDP BC MP Jenny Kwan. Hi to all of you, and thanks for joining me this Sunday morning.
Thanks for having us.
I actually didn't even realize that today is the International Day of Elimination of Racial Discrimination. So it's a good day to talk about this, but it's such a difficult conversation that is happening right now, but an important one. Let's start with what happened in Atlanta. 6 of the 8 women who died, 6 of the 8 people who died were Asian women. Han Dong, what was your reaction to that news?
I was appalled. I was in shock. We've seen a lot of attacks, violent attacks on Asian North Americans, actually, during the pandemic. But I think it's just a symptom of a deeper problem. The systemic racism on Asian Canadians, Americans has always been there.
It's so interesting, Michael Chong, because we have, of course, over the past year talked so much about anti-Black racism, right, and the Black Lives Matter movement. And yet, at the same time as that conversation was happening, anti-Asian racism incidents have increased a lot in this country and across North America. What did you make of those events? Was it in any way surprising to you?
Well, I was shocked and horrified about what happened in Atlanta, and the first thing that crossed my mind is that, somebody actualized the threat. Somebody carried out a threat that they had thought about, and we all have been subject to threats over the years, and somebody in that kind of a situation.
Okay, we're just having a little trouble with your Skype, Michael Chong, so I'll just make sure that's working before I ask you another question. Jenny Kwan, I'll just get your reaction to what unfolded as an Asian woman. What did that feel like to hear that news?
Well, it just strikes fear in your heart, right? And you know that people in the sex trade are particularly vulnerable, particularly targeted. I know here in Vancouver, activists and advocates have spoken out. We're very worried about a copycat incident. For example, Suzanne Jay from the Asian Women for Equality have voiced that concern. Swan, who's another advocacy group in our community, has been raising these issues. So, we have to remember that the people being targeted are real people. It's not just another incident, and these are real people where this is happening. And we need to do more. We need to do more to protect people, every person in our communities.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about what could be done. Han Dong, can you give us a sense of what the federal government has done to address this specific kind of racism?
Absolutely. At the Ministry of Multiculturalism and Minister Chagger has introduced a whole range of programs to support more discussion and to support more initiative at the community level. I think Minister Blair has several times spoke out about this ever since the beginning of the pandemic, led by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The cabinet, the caucus, the government actually has been there, keep saying, and that we condemn any act of racism against Asian Canadians.
That's all important, and I don't want to take away from the importance of speaking out and condemning things, because I do think language is important here. But for instance, in the United States, the president is calling for Congress to support a COVID-19 hate crimes act that is specifically targeted against anti-Asian racism. Is there any thought, Hendong, that is something that could be needed or considered by your government?
Actually, the government has done during the COVID has came out with programs through anti-racism strategy to specifically include anti-Asian racism. I remember a few colleagues of mine along with me has lobbied hard on this, and so when you see it reflects in public policy and the funding stream, it's really helpful to these groups that's been fighting all along. You know, it's not a new problem that we have in this country.
No, Michael Chong, what do you think could make a difference in terms of policy for this kind of thing? It's important for us to have this conversation. I'm glad we're having it, but what sort of concrete measures would you like to see?
Well, I think programs to combat racism are helpful, but I really believe that we have to be careful in the language that we use. It's politicians that have ratcheted up the rhetoric in recent months and recent years.
You mean the former president, I would imagine.
Yeah, the former president, but I would also include Canadians with that. Look, the former head of CSIS in 2010 impugned all Chinese Canadian politicians when he said that there were several Chinese Canadian politicians that were under Beijing's influence without naming them, and cast aspersions on dozens of Chinese Canadian elected politicians. So those kinds of comments are not helpful, and in fact quite contribute to the problem that we see today. And so I think we have to be very careful in public life about the comments and the words that we use. I think that's a starting point. I think programs are helpful, but at the end of the day, it's leadership that's required.
Jenny Kwan, what about you? What would you like to see from the government to address this specific issue, this specific kind of racism?
Well, I think there are a number of things that the Canadian government can do. For example, I remain shocked at the fact that across the country, not every single police department has a hate crime unit. That to me just boggles the mind. And that was an issue that came up even in the last parliament when we were studying the issue around racism, particularly targeting the Muslim community, for example. We also have racist issue. We know that hate crime is underreported. And yet the call for the government to support nonprofits, people with cultural understanding and diversity, to be the first group to connect with people who experience hate crimes, that still hasn't yet been done. And I don't know why that is. For targeting women in the sex trade, for example, we need to change our laws, right? We need to make sure that they're absolutely protected. It shouldn't take a murder, multiple murders for sex trade workers with what's happened in Atlanta for us to turn our minds to it. This is an ongoing issue, has been going on for some time now, and action absolutely is needed more than just words.
Michael Chong, when I asked you earlier your reaction to this, you said we've all experienced this. Have you experienced a heightened racism during the COVID era? Has anything happened to you?
Yes, I've experienced discrimination in the last year. It comes in the form of social media platforms, emails, but that predates the pandemic as well. But I have noted that it has increased year.
Yeah.
And so, look, as the first Canadian of Chinese descent elected from the province of Ontario, I know full well firsthand what it's like to be subject to anti-Asian discrimination.
Yeah.
What's happened last year is certainly an increase, but nothing new.
Hendong, well, I'm sorry to hear that obviously, but Hendong, how about you? Have you experienced anything in the past year that is different or worse?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Actually, I don't, as an MP, I'm not immune to anti-Asian racism. I mean, going back to my campaign in 2019, I got a lot of questions from the members of media asking, a question that they wouldn't normally ask a non-Chinese Canadian candidate. And even I remember the first time in during question period when the opposition asked a question about China, and I got a lot of colleagues looking at my way, and I was like, look at the Prime Minister, don't look at me for the answer. And even I'm really happy that Michael that brought up this point about the political leaders' rhetoric. We've heard senior MPs talking about how Chinese government has penetrated into our institutions, our research centers, and whatnot. I worry about those young people with a Chinese or Asian face, Chinese Canadians, when they go apply for jobs, whether or not they're going to get discriminated against. I look at my son. When he grows up, I don't want him to grow up in this environment.
Jenny Kwan, Jenny Kwan, I only have about 30 seconds, but same question to you in terms of your experience over the past year.
Oh, absolutely, no question, has increased. Some people have even taken to call the coronavirus, COVID-19, the Kwan virus, as an example. That's directly attacking me as a Asian Canadian. And I've had hate hurled at me all throughout my entire political career. And in fact, on this very day, several years ago, at a rally speaking against racism and discrimination, someone hurled a smoke bomb into the crowd just as when I was about to speak on the stage. And, this happens all the time, but it shouldn't take the murders. It shouldn't take incidents such as what's happened to Atlanta for us to get to where we are, to say that we need to tackle this in a real way.
Thank you all so much. I really can't thank you enough for taking the time, all three of you from three different parties, to talk about this. And I hope it makes a small difference. Thanks for your frankness. Thank you very much.
Thank you.